Former President George W. Bush returned to the Gulf Coast today as the region marks 10 years since Hurricane Katrina. Mr. Bush and his wife Laura visited Louisiana and Mississippi. They toured the Warren Easton Charter School in New Orleans to highlight improvements in education. The former president says the school is an example of how New Orleans has bounced back.
The resilience you teach at Warren Easton is the same resilience that this city showed the world in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. On this anniversary, the work of making a stronger and more hopeful New Orleans goes on. You've achieved a lot over the last 10 years. And with belief in success and a faith in God, New Orleans will achieve even more.
The state took over New Orleans schools after Katrina, and nearly all are now charter schools. But critics are questioning whether they made any real progress. Talitha Halley was a 12-year-old girl when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans' 9th Ward. After living in both the Superdome and the Astrodome, Talitha eventually settled in Sharpstown, Texas. Today, Talitha is a graduate of Howard University and has just started a new job in Baltimore, where she joins us this evening. Good evening to you, Talitha. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So you lived in Texas and you're now in Maryland, but seeing how much your hometown of New Orleans has rebounded since the storm, have you ever considered moving back?
I have considered moving back. It won't be anytime soon though, because I'd like to travel and explore different places, but I definitely have considered moving back soon, but just not right now.
So let's go back to this time 10 years ago, the storm bearing down on New Orleans. Your family is evacuating. Take us through those moments and those feelings.
10 years ago this time, we were already in the Superdome. But prior to that, my mom, my sister, and I evacuated to the Superdome and thought that we were only going to be gone for a few days and that we would be able to return home shortly thereafter. But after spending a week in the Superdome, we knew that we weren't going to go back home. So we evacuated to Houston after being in the Superdome for 7 days and started our new lives there.
So you're talking about staying in the Superdome and then the Astrodome in Houston. What was that time like for you then? At what point did you realize how devastating the storm was?
I guess I realized how bad it was the first time we were able to go outside on top of the Superdome. Prior to that, we kind of stayed in and we weren't able to leave. The one time that we were able to get fresh air, you saw the devastation in front of your eyes. People were kind of dying, thirsty, hungry, distraught, finding out that their relatives were dead or didn't make it out or had no idea where their family members were. I remember just kind of being in shock and surprise and not really knowing what was really going on. The one time that I actually started to cry was when my mom and my sister and I were almost broken up. One of the soldiers were asking us if, you know, 2 of us could go and then 1 of us could stay or something like that. And we begged and pleaded for us not to be broken up. The first time that I saw the devastation that had happened to my city was when I was able to watch CNN at my aunt's house when we left the Astrodome, and I couldn't believe it. I was in shock and so heartbroken, and I felt like our world had just come to an end.
So even though it's been a decade, it still seems like this is still very real for you. Those feelings are still pretty raw.
They are. A kind of negative feeling of nostalgia comes over me as I reflect on where I was this time 10 years ago, and so many other Augusts along the way. I remember in 2006 and 2007, we were still trying to pick ourselves up and kind of move on and still get acclimated to starting a new life. But, and now it's like, wow, it's really been 1 decade, and it's still so very real.
How many times have you been back to your neighborhood in the 9th Ward since the storm?
I I've been back to New Orleans a plethora of times. I actually split my holidays when I was in college, go back from Mardi Gras. And so every time that I'm there, I try to make at least one trip back to my old neighborhood, which is still devastating to this day to see a place that is almost unrecognizable except for a few landmarks, and to know that I'll never be able to show my kids and my family where I grew up and where I used to play, and the levees that I used to kind of roll up and down as a kid and have my brother push me up and down in my Barbie car. I'll never get that chance to show my kids that, or my friends that. And when we go home, or when I want to take my friends back to New Orleans to see where I live or where my family lives, it will never be to my old neighborhood.
You know, Talitha, you certainly are a success story, having been through so much, then going on to graduate from Howard University. You've actually said before that Katrina benefited you. What do you mean by that?
I think we go through everything for a reason. I don't think anything happens by chance, and it just so happened that I had to go through something really traumatic in order to be successful. With the help of a community of people, a number of individuals who saw to it that I would make it out and that I would be successful, particularly an organization called Communities in Schools at my high school had a focus group tailored towards Hurricane Katrina survivors in all grades, 9th through 12th, and we just sit and talk and reminisce or get out whatever feelings we had, and we felt really comfortable in that focus group, and so that helped me a lot with coping and transitioning and moving on.
And you talk about that community of people, some of those folks, survivors that you've met along the way, stayed in touch with. How important are fellow survivors to your life? I mean, certainly there are survivors out there that have talked about fellow survivors being so important to them to cope throughout this time. How has it been for you?
A tremendous help. I don't think I could have gotten through any of it without my friends who were my peers, who were going through it at the same time as me, or my family who I went through everything with together. They're very important. You know, it's always good to have a buddy to say, I went through the same thing, so you're not alone. And to know that you're not alone means the world to you when you feel like you're weird or bad, or, you know, like you should be moving on a lot faster than you are. And when there's somebody to say, no, take your time, like, it's okay, it really does help. And it makes all the difference, I think, in your growth.
All right, Talitha Halley, thank you so much for sharing your story, and good luck to you in Baltimore.
Thank you so much.